Welcome to the 11th Annual Baptist Communicators Association Fall Forum. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Margaret Colson. I'm the Executive Director for Baptist Communicators Association, and I serve as the Communications Editor for the Florida Baptist Convention. Through the years, the Fall Forum has become a wonderful time for us to gather virtually and be informed and inspired. And what I have learned is that you're going to hear a lot of ideas, but sometimes it's the smallest idea that can make the biggest difference in what you do every day as a Christian communicator. Each year, personally, I try to select a scripture that will be my focus for the year. You're never going to guess what scripture I picked for 2024. I picked Acts 20:24. Imagine that. It helps me to remember the reference. So in that scripture, the Apostle Paul said that his aim in life was to testify to the good news of God's grace. My prayer for you as you listen and learn during this Fall Forum is that you will walk away with a renewed zeal, a renewed passion to testify to the good news of God's grace in all that you do, in your stories, your videos, your photos, your social media posts, your PR campaigns, whatever you do as a Christian communicator. And now I'm happy to turn this over to Bobby Puffenberger, our president.
Thank you, Margaret. Hey there, BCA. It is so good to gather together this morning. Whether you are watching from your desk or watching with coworkers in a conference room, this morning is going to be a lot of learning, and we're just so excited that you joined us today. But before we do, we want to take some time to pray for those impacted by recent hurricanes Helene and Milton. As you know, the devastation caused by these storms has left so many in need, and the extent of the destruction is even now still being realized. Many of you are involved in communicating what's happening on the ground and how Southern Baptists are responding. Some of you have responded through giving and others through going. Some of you have even had family members and friends that have been affected by this tragedy. Please know that your BCA officers are uplifting you in prayer. BCA, if any of you feel led to give, please do so through your state's disaster relief ministry or through Send Relief. But now let's look to the Lord, our strength and our refuge. Let's pray. Lord, we pray for those impacted by Hurricane Helene and Milton, including those first responders and the volunteers. You know more than any of us what's needed. Be with the families and the survivors of these storms. Would you help them in their time of need? Would you strengthen the first responders and volunteers serving in the weeks and the months and the years to come? Would you work in the logistics of those organizations that are responding and through the government as they try to help the most people in the most restorative way? As those communicating the needs in response to a wider audience, would you help us and would you guide us? God, we need your strength to endure. And most importantly, would you draw all unto yourself? We desire that hearts may turn to you. Lord, we long for others to find you. Please open hearts for gospel conversations. And thank you so much for Southern Baptists. Thank you for the incredible picture of your church reaching out and helping those in need and coming together in a time of need. Thank you for our disaster relief teams and for Send Relief and local churches on the ground being your hands and feet. May they carry the gospel with them, ready to share. And as we get into this Fall Forum, it is a busy time for a lot of us, for most of us. And God, I pray that you would help us put aside distractions. Lord, I ask that you would help us approach this morning with a time of an attitude of learning. And God, thank you so much for each and every one of these BCA members and their incredible work and impact to share your gospel among the nations. God, we are so thankful for this group, and we pray that you would be with the speakers, that you would give them the words to say, that you would help them communicate clearly and effectively. In Jesus' name, amen. And now I'm going to turn it over to our Professional Development Coordinator, Sonia Singh. Sonia, thank you so much for all that you've done to coordinate this Fall Forum.
Thank you so much, Bobby, and thank you, Margaret. It's so exciting to be your professional development coordinator this year, and thank you all for joining us today. We have a great program ready for you. Before we jump into it, though, we wanted to let you know that throughout the program today, we're going to be taking a series of tiny little detours to introduce you to all the schools being honored during the Student Awards program later today. That'll take place in a brief ceremony after we wrap the end of our program this morning, so stick around and cheer them on. Let's go ahead and kick it off with Baylor University.
I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I wanna live. Forever we'll be singing like, oh. I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I wanna live. This is how I wanna. Forever we'll be singing like, oh. I'll never get used to this.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that video. And we're excited to hop right in. We know that if you are here with us today, you care deeply about reaching people through storytelling. But we also know that we live in a time where reading and maybe longer text in general has declined. So what are the most effective, most meaningful ways to reach others today? Our first guest, Dr. Dawn Barger, the International Mission Board's Director for Innovation and MX Labs, and Dr. Grant Lovejoy, IMB Director for Scripture and Orality, are here with us today, and they have delved into the enduring power of conversation in modern communication in their book, Unreadable, another book you probably won't read. And yes, they are aware of the irony in writing a book called Unreadable, a book you probably won't read. So they are here to talk with us today. No reading at all.
That's right.
We're here
No
to talk
reading.
today to show us how to reach others and build trust with those who maybe prefer authentic conversation over reading through videos and other formats as well. So Grant and Dawn, welcome. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being here with
It's great
us
to be here.
today. Tell us about Unreadable. What sparked the idea for this book?
Yeah. At the International Mission Board, we care about people, and we care about people where they congregate in large numbers and small. And so, cities are growing, cities are becoming more diverse. That increases the complexity of trying to be effective communicators. And so, we were asked to look into what's happening communicationally in cities and try to find best practices or to identify what the challenges are. And so, as we talked about how to do that, we decided to do a qualitative approach. We were told we needed to interview at least 20 people. We kind of got carried away.
Yes.
And we interviewed something over 250. And as a result of that, we have, brought forward what we've learned, and some really interesting conversations. We interviewed people of all kinds. Christians, non-Christians, missionaries, pastors, business people, men and women, younger, older. And what we came away with is a series of insights just about how communication is changing and how to be more effective at it.
Yeah. And what are some things that we can take away as communicators ourselves? Everyone watching, what are the ways we can implement this in our day-to-day tasks?
Yeah, so I think that maybe one of the things that it wasn't really surprising to us, but it became an aha, was that this device right here is how most people get a lot of their information. So the personal back and forth, person to person, that certainly is powerful, but the amount of time that people are spending watching videos, listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, in social media, interacting in, it's still text, but it's really not the way we write. It's
Right.
not formal text. So it's more text how we speak. And so we did find that a lot of people that get information, we looked at it, how do they get information that shapes who they are and what they believe? And so we found that phones and digital have a significant impact on how people ingest, internalize information.
Yeah. One of the things that was really reinforced for us is just how much digital forms of communication allow people to get a lot of what they want without reading, or without reading very much. Many of these new digital formats like audiobooks, things like that, even video messaging and audio messaging, all allow people to really participate fully in what's going on in the world without being very proficient at reading long-form print. One of the things that was interesting beyond that, which is, and I'm a little sheepish even speaking to the BCA about this, is just the importance of knowing your audience and how they
Yes.
communicate.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel sheepish because you're professional communicators, and so you know all that. If there's any insight beyond that, though, is that we often asked near the end of our interviews, after people had described to us how communication happens in their city, to the Christian ones, especially those in missions or ministry, how has this information that you know about how people communicate in your city, how has that affected your own communication strategy in ministry? And we got a lot of sheepish looks from
Yeah.
people who said,
Yeah.
well, not much, or not nearly as much as it should. And even in some cases, we had some youngish members of our teams who said, it would more if my supervisor would allow.
Yeah.
And so they want to do these things, but maybe
Yeah.
don't always know how.
I think a lot of the people we interviewed at the end of it, when we would ask that question, they would go, well, that's a really good question. And it's not that they don't recognize that times are changing. It's just they haven't looked at how are my people getting information and really incorporated that into the strategy for how best to communicate.
Yeah. The other thing that I think would be germane for all of us is just that sometimes we have two incompatible things going in our heads at the same time. We talked with a very zealous evangelist who's from an ethnic minority. He told us all about his group, including that they don't read or write, that they're not much for going to school. And we asked him, okay, so then what is your approach for evangelism? He said, I hand out copies of printed New Testaments in our language.
Yeah.
And we tried to keep the poker face, when we get responses like that. But later we followed up, and why are you handing out printed New Testaments
Yeah.
to people who don't read?
Right.
And he said, I just think everybody ought to have a copy of the New Testament.
Yeah.
A good sentiment, but
And so we just saw that it's possible to have two
Right.
things that you know and believe, but not bring them
Right.
into dialogue with one another when you're talking about communication.
Yes.
The conventional sometimes has a momentum.
I would say, though, that the reason we ended up writing this book is the book itself gives you a platform to have the conversation we're having. And so while a lot of people that we talked to readily said, we don't engage in reading books, most everybody's, well, but I love getting books. Like, I love it. If
Interesting.
I'd love to have a book, but, and I may skim it, or I may look at the table of contents and look at something. But, when not everyone was like this, but many people would say, but I'm probably not going to read the book.
And that affects the way that you've even laid it out and presented it. And I
Yeah.
should say, as I'm asking questions, I should let our viewers know that you guys can also submit questions for us in the live stream, and we can pass those along to our speakers throughout the program. So feel free. But you have laid this out with a lot of visuals and QR codes at the end of each chapter that lead to videos.
So the QR code, if you don't want to read the book, you can scan the QR code at the end of the chapter, and then I'll pop on the screen and I'll explain to you what that chapter was about.
And these bite-sized,
Yeah,
2 or 3
2 or 3
minute.
minute summaries. Yeah.
And we know that, writing a book about people not reading as much as they did is itself kind of ironic or hypocritical or whatever. We like to think that we know what we're doing, and this reflects two realities for us. Part of the people we want to influence are people who are still avid readers. These
Yeah.
are often decision makers in
Yeah.
organizations. And
There's
we
still a
want
value to holding a book.
Oh, yeah. This legitimizes it that it's physical. But we've also included in there, instead of doing a lot of stats and things like that, we've told the stories of some of the people we interviewed. And just said, here's their description of their life, their communicational habits. And we hope that'll be really helpful to people. And I would say for each of us, we would love to have an ongoing conversation with any BCA members or their organizations, just to be of help. One of the things that we started with as a conviction and we ended just as convinced is that there's no single right way to, where we can just say, here's the package, do this. Really, it is more of a process. Know your audience, listen to them, and then think about how to communicate with them effectively, given who they are and how they prefer to communicate.
And something that's interesting to me in what you said is this idea of knowing your audience and knowing that this is something that we already know, that stories connect with people, that genuine conversations, testimonies, things like this has been going on longer than the printed word even. So it's really circling back to something we've kind of always known to be true and maybe forget, and I think that's important. That's part of maybe why you've laid it out this way, made it, use videos to help people come back to that.
I've never met someone who doesn't like a good story.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
we're wired for story. We love stories, and we love to watch movies and TV shows, and we love it when someone gives an illustration of something. But not everybody likes to read. And so we want to make sure that we cover both of those bases.
Yes, absolutely. I think we have some questions coming in
All right.
from the audience, so forgive me looking at my phone, but what generational differences did you discover in how people communicate, and how can we communicate across those generational differences ourselves?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's not just generations, it's cultures. So we did do this research in many different global cities, so it wasn't focused on one. And it was really interesting that in some cities that we went to, I would say maybe the boomer generation for their culture, maybe has a television playing 24/7. Like it's just always on. It's in the background, and there's news that's how they get their information. Yet in that same city, we interviewed a guy, not a believer, PhD in artificial intelligence, and that guy never reads books.
A PhD.
A PhD, never reads books, and he said he gets his information where to party. He goes to Instagram, and where he gets his news was on Twitter. And in that country, that was how people got it. But the older generations may have gotten theirs through the television.
Right.
So
that's changed.
We interviewed a 25-year-old who's a marketing guy for his career, and we asked this question to him, and he immediately just, boom, boom. Well, if I wanted to reach 13 to 15-year-olds, I would do this.
Yes.
If I was, 15 to 18, it would be this. 19 to 23, and so he sliced quickly, and he named different platforms and different approaches that he would take. So it's very clear that he recognized in his marketing business. He had a highly segmented audience. And he did make some comment. He said, and then you do something else for older people. And we asked, being gluttons for punishment, what do you mean by older audience? He said,
like
30, 35.
yeah,
So we recognized that.
culturally, there's a little bit of difference as what's a boomer in that country than in our country.
Yeah, of course. And something that I know another speaker is going to talk about today, and that comes up in your book as well, is the idea of hearing from someone that you trust and who comes from your community. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how powerful that is and how we can incorporate that too in the way that we tell stories and empower people to share that way.
Yeah, some of the most encouraging things we found were people who were communicating effectively in their culture. One was a young guy in his 20s. He had become a Christian. He still was in dialogue with non-Christian friends who, asked him lots of questions. So he had begun a very simple, once a week, he would hold up his Android phone. He would state the question that his non-Christian friends were asking. He would give a 60-second answer, and he had, I think, about 1,100 followers in a matter of months. Very simple, low-tech, but he was one of them. He was from that place.
It was a very closed, 1,100 may not seem like a lot for someone here, but this was a very, very closed country and people group, and so to get that number of people was quite impressive. Showed his following. I think that the other piece of that is when we're looking at how are we communicating with people is to, when we've talked about know your audience, in some of the places that we were at were very closed, very, you could not openly talk about Christianity. But what we found with people who were in those situations, who were believers, is that they would go to YouTube and search, and in some countries YouTube is the #1 search engine.
Right.
And they would watch videos answering their questions about Christianity. And so if we're not there, if we're not in those spaces answering those questions, then they're probably not going to find our content.
Yeah. And to your question, one of the people we interviewed was an Iranian young woman she was searching on YouTube for whomever answered her questions, but she found one particular woman who was also Iranian who, in the course of her videos, it was obvious to the woman we interviewed that she was on the same path that woman had been on. And so then she said, I watched everything that she posted.
Yes.
And then she got in touch with her via some sort of messaging app, and ultimately the woman who was making the videos was able to lead the other one to faith. And just finding somebody like her, whose journey resembled her own, who understood her struggles, was really important. And so, putting the right people forward is also one of the things we saw that's really a best practice.
Yeah, and finding them wherever we go. Yeah, that must be a challenge. But they're there. They've got 1,100 followers. They're posting. And if they're answering questions that they were curious about, someone else is going to be curious about those too. Yeah. Right. Do you find that YouTube and other things that they've acted as the same sort of jumping off point that we hope the book is going to be, these conversations starting online?
Yeah, and so here at the IMB, we have a pretty robust digital engagement strategy that we use, and we train teams around the world how to engage people online and run an ad on social media. It's funny, like everybody in the States talks like, well, nobody's on Facebook, and they don't want to admit they're on Facebook. But then you look and guess where they are? They're on Facebook. Yeah. And around the world, Facebook is a very strong platform in many countries, most countries, I would say. It is the dominant platform. And so you can run an ad for relatively inexpensively and then have an ongoing conversation. You can train responders on how to respond to those, and we are seeing wonderful results through those. And they begin an online digital relationship, and we try to get that offline so that we can, spend some time with them, disciple them. So.
All right, that's great. And any other ways that you can offer tips, especially I started as a writer, so seeing, oh no, people aren't reading the things that we're writing can seem discouraging at the start, but what other advice do you have for taking that and transferring it and helping our newsrooms and our churches and people reach people most meaningfully?
Yeah, one of the things that we reiterate to try to reassure people in our sphere is we're not abandoning print. We're not abandoning the hope that people will actually read their Bible or read it at length. But we start with people where they are. But we don't necessarily endorse that they stay right where they are. We hope that as people hear stories or watch videos that pertain to biblical events, that then they get intrigued and they watch more and they watch more, and then they say, where do these come from? We say, well, it's from this book. Oh, it's in the book. All right. So that we can cultivate among people a hunger and a regular practice of reading and studying and treasuring Scripture. So the fact that we start with them at one point is not indicative that we think that's where we would like for them to wind up in their communication practices.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that surprised you in this research? You talked to 250 people globally. Yeah, anything else that really jumped out that you weren't expecting to learn?
I think that the PhD guy who started out, and we, just to be clear, like we didn't go in saying, okay, these are going to be oral people. We're going to we're going to put the question in such a way they'll answer. We just said, hey, how do you get information that shapes who you are and what you believe? And he said, well, I'll tell you how I don't get information. I don't read books. And I really was not expecting, I think he was like late 20s, finishing his PhD in artificial intelligence, and I was excited to talk to him, and he was like, yeah, I don't get that. I watch videos. That's how I get information. I only read when I'm required to. And we had another student, another person we interviewed who was actually in seminary in the U.S. He was from overseas and living there, but he's doing remote. And he actually said that his wife told him, you only read when you are in class. So and he's like, I realize I only read when I have to read. So to your question earlier of what would I say to people who write? Think about how you can make your writing interactive and how you can pair video, sort of like what we've tried to do here with the QR codes, but how can you embed content inside of your bigger print work so that people can go and see a video that goes along with it?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I work in education. I'm an instructor of journalism at CBU. And I hear that all the time. Yeah, people are reading for classes, they're reading for their commitments, and they want to engage with other things, but it's just an exhaustion to it. Yeah. So just meeting people where they're at, like you said.
Yeah, one of the things that has guided us is just this comment from before these interviews, but the theme of it came up again and again. Essentially people saying, I like to learn, I just don't like to read. Yeah. And I think that's then the question for us as communicators generally. What do you have for people who say, I like to learn, I'm curious about your subject. Yeah. I just don't like to read.
That's okay. Can meet them where they are. Yeah. We've got a couple other questions coming in. The first is, can you share some of the digital engagement stats or stories that resulted from the Olympics.
Yes, absolutely we can. I wish I had the stats right in front of me, but I will tell one story. So we ran ads, I think, in around 14 languages, and we had a few hundred responders who were helping us. A lot of those Southern Baptists here in the States who were doing the responding. But one of the stories that to me was super fascinating was there was a lady in South Africa who saw an ad, and she sent a message in. So the responder who we had trained was here in the U.S., former missionary overseas back in the States, and she was able to start responding to this lady. She found that the lady in South Africa, so think the Olympics are happening in France, a responder in Kentucky, the lady is in South Africa, and she is saying, I'm at the end. I've not eaten in a week. I've given up on life. And so our responder was able to work with her, help her. We reached out, they reached out then to our people living in South Africa who were actually able to go physically there and spend some time with them and encourage the lady. She was a believer, she was just at the end. And so that's one story. There are so many different stories about that. But yeah, we saw lots of people watch videos, engage with us. I think we had over 20,000 Bible study downloaded from our, so we had a YouVersion cooperation with them, and so people would download Bible studies. And so yeah, it was really, really profitable.
Yeah, wonderful.
I think one other thing that the digital engagement is helping us with is, you know, we work in places where the number of Christians is tiny, and the number of people who are inquiring about Christianity is comparatively tiny, but in absolute numbers, maybe hundreds or thousands. But in a city of several million, it's really hard to find the ones, especially if they feel they must keep their curiosity under wraps. How do you find the needle in the haystack, really? And what we found is that digital advertising is a way for us as Christian people who want to talk about Jesus to find the people in various cities around the world who also want to have a genuine conversation with somebody. But it's too dangerous for them to you know, walk down the street with a T-shirt that says, "I'd like to talk with someone about Jesus." Or for a Christian to walk down, "Want to talk about Jesus?" You know, ask me. But helping them find each other in a safe environment where we have processes in place to help protect the well-being of both the responders and the people who are curious.
I mean, that's the case in dangerous places, but it's the place here. It's the exact same thing here. If I were to tell you, hey, we're going to go out this afternoon and do evangelism, there's this neighborhood, there's 800 homes in it, let's just go knock on doors. Or I said, hey, in that neighborhood, the blue house on the corner, there's someone in there who is inquiring about Christianity. Our efforts would best be spent on the person who's reached out and said, we want to know more. So this helps it. If you think of like a marketing funnel of 20 million people in a city, and you can go down and you can find the 200 that are very interested, you start with those.
Yeah, because that's a substantial population right there. Yeah. We've got another one. Interesting that Jesus walked the earth with people that didn't necessarily read. How can he be our model?
Oh, you are in Grant and Bear. This is where we get excited.
Good question. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, just the relationship is crucial. And the conversations with people and starting where they are, you know, just as he so often did. You know, he did. One of the things that's predictable about Jesus is he never addressed two individuals identically. You know, if he dealt with the woman of Samaria differently than he did Nicodemus, for instance. And so that is crucial. He often told stories, parables, and that got people thinking. And the same kind of thing today, telling our own personal story. One of the things that came out in our interviews again and again and again as we talked with people who had not been Christians, then became Christians over a period of years, that they said, it was a friend told me, and they often, you know, say, someone shared the gospel with me, and we pressed it, what was the gospel? And they said, and they told stories about how God met their need. It wasn't technically, theologically, the gospel as we would normally define it, but it was a portion of God's care for people, his attentiveness to our needs, his willingness to answer the prayers of people who called on him in trust. And so just that telling our stories frequently, often. And it doesn't have to be some dramatic thing. Just, you know, I used to really be so scared. I just couldn't sleep at night for my fear of the future. But now I don't have that. Those are really powerful for people who are facing similar things.
Yeah, and it's genuine. It's real. People can relate to it. Yeah.
And it's coming from somebody they know and trust.
Yeah, and that takes it to a whole
Huge.
other level.
Yeah.
Big deal. Also, what implications do you see from your study for our ministerial training paradigm in seminary that is so heavily focused on textbooks and reading?
As a former seminary professor, I'll let you answer that one.
Yes, I spent a decade and a half teaching full-time on the seminary faculty, and I still think that theological educators are correct that books are a tremendous resource. A simple book like this is an enormously powerful technology. We sometimes don't think of that as tech, but
Right.
it's a form of its own tech, and it's really powerful. We have dialogue ongoing with theological educators, and I've been part of setting up conferences. We've produced books on how to contextualize theological education for a variety of settings, including oral ones. So, what we're arguing is that it's about process and achieving the aims. Frankly, in many cases, seminaries are one, but there are many others. We have gotten so used to pursuing a given aim through one method that to us then over time that aim and that method become one and the same. And so we're asking people, right, would you define again, what are you trying to achieve? And that now it's back up. Are there multiple ways that you might achieve that? And so that's part of our dialogue with seminary faculty members is we want to see seminary students do robust learning, substantial learning. They need to come away really knowing the things that are important to know, knowing them well. But are there, again, it's a little bit more of that, if they like to learn, but they don't like to read, can we get them there? And, I was talking with theological educators just recently, just said, our students will not read their textbooks, but they will listen to the audio version of the textbook. Well, if their learning takes place, whether they read it with their eyes or hear it with their ears,
Still happening.
yeah, it's still happening. And I think unless we just say no, you have to
Read.
it was not part of this interview, but a conversation I had years ago. I talked with a seminary student outside the U.S. about classes and expectations and so forth. And as part of that conversation, he said to me, on his campus, students consider the required reading to be the torture they must endure as a condition of getting their degree. As a theological educator at the time, I thought, I wish I had a better feeling about reading.
Yeah.
But it puts it in context as when you think about as a teacher, assigning the textbooks.
Right.
Are you picking long, kind of classic textbooks that you just know students are not likely to read? And I know it's agonizing because you say, I don't want to water it down. I don't want to capitulate. I want to stretch my students. So there's not a single easy answer.
Sure.
But I think, can we help them learn?
Yes. Yeah, it's not just meeting our audiences where they are, it's meeting students and other populations where they are as well.
Yeah.
In orality, we talk about internalizing the story, internalizing information, and I think that it would be really good for us to, even in academic settings, to think, how are we helping people internalize the information so they can apply it?
Absolutely. And last thing, where can people find your book if they would like to?
It's on Amazon.
Or watch videos.
Yeah, it's on Amazon, and you can get a print or digital copy there. We don't have an audio book out yet, but hopefully soon.
Yet.
Then you can listen to it. You don't have to read the unreadable book.
No one's making you read. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also there are copies available through the IMB online store as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much,
No,
Sean
thank
and
you.
Grant, for being with us today. We appreciate your time. And we hope that everyone checks out a copy of Unreadable.
Yeah.
Thank you again. And we're going to toss it now to our next school, and I have absolutely zero bias in teeing this one up, California Baptist University. Take it away.
Of course.
I got a good feeling. You got me in the mood. I got a good feeling. And I know you feel it too.
Part of the joy of Fall Forum for me is getting to meet some of our speakers in person for the very first time. It's also a joy, though, to introduce those I've had the pleasure of knowing and learning from for years, like our next speaker. Dr. Elizabeth Smith is an associate professor of journalism at Pepperdine University. which is also my alma mater. In addition to being an Emmy-winning news producer and the director of student media at Pepperdine, she also researches areas like news literacy, something that people of all ages need more than ever as we try to discern all the news we may take in every day. She's going to share some of that knowledge with us today, what we can take from it, not just as communicators, but also as Christian communicators. And most importantly, how the pursuit of truth lets us connect more deeply with our audiences, who are also our neighbors.
Good morning. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I hope this time is valuable for you. I hope it's edifying. My name is Elizabeth Smith, and I'm an associate professor of journalism here at Pepperdine University in Southern California. I'm also the advisor and director of Pepperdine Graphic Media, our on-campus student newsroom and newspaper here at Pepperdine. Just some quick background information on me. My professional career in journalism began in Newport, Rhode Island at the Newport Daily News. This was at a time just as newspapers were moving online and figuring out or trying to figure out how they thought they could manage the digital revolution that would end up massively disrupting the newspaper industry, more so than anyone could have ever imagined at that time. There in Rhode Island at the Newport Daily News, I had the opportunity to work and live in such a historical and beautiful part of our country, and I also learned a lot about myself and who I am as a person and who I wanted to be as a journalist. Eventually, I worked my way back across the country to California. Along the way, I worked at a couple of different local newspapers, and then once I completed my master's degree at Pepperdine University, I started working in broadcast news here in Los Angeles. I was working at KTLA. Over the course of the next 8 years, I produced regular broadcast news shows, had the opportunity to work on their digital platforms, and got to experience a lot of what it's like to work in the second largest market in the United States with such an urgent medium. Now at Pepperdine, I teach journalism classes and I advise the student newspaper. Because of various service roles that I have outside of Pepperdine, I also have the opportunity to work with college and high school journalists and their advisors across the country. What I hear and see every day in that capacity is really hardworking student journalists, and advisors who care deeply about the quality of the product that they are producing. My talk today is called "To Know Your Neighbors, We Must Know the News." Whatever you might think about the news, Jesus commands us, guides us, and ultimately models for us what it means to know our neighbors. There are many examples of this from biblical text. One I would like to point to start off our time together is the story of the Good Samaritan. In this parable that is told and retold so often in Luke 10:25 through 37, we can read the following. "And behold, a lawyer stood up to him and put him to the test, saying, 'Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?' He said to him, 'What is written in the law? How do you read it?' And he answered, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.' And he said to him, 'You've answered correctly. Do this and you will live.' But he, desiring to justify himself to Jesus, said, 'And who is my neighbor?' And Jesus replied, 'A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was also going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side of the road. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, also passed by on the other side of the road. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him, he bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back.' Which of these three do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said, you go and do likewise. Our neighbor, according to Jesus in this parable, is the person whose need you see. But to meet those needs, we first have to see the need. One of the ways that we can learn more about the needs of our neighbors is through the news. But because of our very fractured media space, where we encounter news on social media but rarely see an entire story, and the polarized political climate that surrounds us, that often leverages social distrust of institutions, including news organizations, what we see, or what I see, is a need for increased news literacy efforts, especially for young people, but for all people. So now I would like to share some research on news literacy that I think is helpful here. News literacy is an emerging area of education and research. It focuses on better teaching the knowledge and skills people need to understand the complexities of the news industry and reporting the news. With increased knowledge and skills, news literacy should empower people to find credible news sources and to be more aware of their own biases and preferences. And news literacy, at its best, can also teach people when to question and push back on how news is being presented. We know that trust in the news has continued to decline, and in 2016 took a nosedive. We know that there is a generational divide among people who say they have less trust in the news. For people ages 18 to 49, this is according to Gallup, only about a quarter of those people have a fair amount or better trust in the news. For those who are 50 and older, it's a little bit better at 38%. We also know that the less educated you are, the less affluent you are, the less likely you are to have ever known a journalist or to have ever met a journalist, or at least be aware that you've met a journalist. So that means that if you are highly educated and considered affluent, you might know the people doing the work, but for everyone else, you aren't familiar with someone who's actually doing this type of work. We also know that there are really big gaps in users' knowledge of journalism. So according to Media Insight Project, people are often confused about the terms that journalists use to describe their work. And by the way, this is not an indictment of the audience or the people who have the confusion. Oftentimes, journalists are speaking a different language and expecting an audience to understand it. So it's important to point out where some of those gaps exist. About 50% of adults don't really know what the term op-ed means, and yet this is often the type of content that becomes so controversial in a newspaper within a news organization, 43% don't really know what attribution means when it comes to a reporting news story. And 42% don't understand how or why anonymous sourcing works. Again, really important topics. Several years ago, my co-author, Dr. Teresa de los Santos here at Pepperdine, and I had the opportunity to embark on a journey where we could test some ideas around news literacy with high school students here in Southern California. We were able to go to the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, where they have a simulation set up in what is a recreated Situation Room. And when I say recreated, I mean it's actually the Situation Room from several administrations ago from the White House. They were able to get the actual items from inside the Situation Room and reconstruct it at the Ronald Reagan Library. And they have created a space there that runs a simulation called the Situation Room Experience. In this simulation that runs in real time, high school students, college students, even professional organizations can come out and they play the role of either a cabinet member in the president's cabinet or a member of the press in a fictitious breaking news scenario, they have to make decisions about what gets reported or what gets shared with the public. It's 75 minutes, real time, and accuracy is really important. We were able to watch several groups of high school students go through this. We had the very rich opportunity to do that. We were also able to talk to those groups of high school students with consent, and talk to them about how that experience felt and also what it made them think about the news after reflecting on the experience. In the course of the simulation, students get to the students who play the members of the press get to produce mock live broadcast news hits, updating viewers on what's going on, and they also get to create simulated tweets. What we found was that those students often did not attribute work. They could model a traditional news delivery style for broadcast, but not for social media. This gave us a lot of good understanding, and it raised some really good questions about how news is being perceived or experienced on social media versus more traditional platforms. It also gave us a lot of important insight into how young people in particular think about the news and their particular wants and needs from it. What we found is that this idea of an evolving news story, so news information that is being updated as journalists and the public learn more, was really hard for them to cope with. We had students say it made no sense, it made it so much harder to complete, it felt like a puzzle that I was putting together. They struggled with this idea of speed versus accuracy. They wanted to be quick to get this information out to this fictitious audience that's included in the simulation, but they also wanted to be correct. We know that they thought through and in some cases struggled with the idea of sourcing and verifying information. And some of them characterized this experience to feel like a game of telephone. So the old game of telephone where I say something, whisper it to the next person, and the point of the game is to see how much that has changed by the time it gets to the end of the circle. They felt like if just one piece of information changed, or if something was misinterpreted during these fictitious press conferences, that it actually just felt like a game of telephone. But we also know that these students had high expectations for what they wanted their news information to sound like, to be like. They want highly credible, high quality news information, but felt a little perplexed as to where to even begin to look for it. This was important for us. We wanted to think through things like transparency. We wanted to think through issues where we can understand better why there is such low trust in journalism and how we can support journalists, news organizations, and audience members to get better information. This was important because we believe, my co-author and I, but also so many of us believe that this is really a core function of a free press. It's to hold the powerful to account. It's also to keep communities connected. It's a powerful role. We don't keep them connected as activists or advocates. We keep them connected through shared information, shared understandings that then community members can make decisions about on how to act. I've done some writing on this in addition to my scholarly work, and I believe that as Christians, we should be seeking truthful information at its core. That truthful information is the starting point of our faith journey, and that as we seek to discern and decipher what is truthful, we should be looking to places that are actively and eagerly telling us truthful, emotional, and high quality stories about our communities. News literacy is really important at any age. We know that there is a tendency maybe to want to go straight to the source, but the truth is, in our busy lives, we sometimes can go straight to our neighbor and ask them what they need. But if our neighbor is anyone with need who we see, then it is also the community struggling in the aftermath of a hurricane or a wildfire or any number of natural disasters. We also know it may be a school, a community, a church that is struggling. It may be a family. It may be a group of people. And how we can know better their needs and ways to even start to reach out to meet those needs is by seeking out quality information about our neighbors. Those of us of faith are taught to seek truth in our spiritual lives. But what about when we turn on the news channel, open our laptops, pick up our phones? Do we prioritize truth as much when we're sharing a story as when we are reading a scripture? I think many of us do. And that's why I think this conversation around the news is so important. We know that truth can be disruptive, but we also know that truth can be life-changing. We have to earnestly seek sources that present truth in our communities and in our world. And sometimes that means we have to pay for a subscription to our local newspaper and find a national credible source that is reporting on the government. We have to check and question and compare. Michael Schudson, who's a journalism scholar, not a theologian, calls the news media the unlovable press. He argues that the press doesn't have to be loved to be necessary, but it does need to be true. So as we conclude here this morning, I just want to encourage us all to think about how we can promote the principles of news literacy that gives young people and all people better tools to decipher truthful, accurate information around them, and how, as people of faith, we can promote and spread truthful, accurate information. In that way, we hold ourselves accountable, we hold newsrooms accountable, and we hold our communities accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Samford University, for that amazing look into life at Samford University. Hello, BCA friends. I'm Akila Mays, and I'm your Communications Vice President, and I'm interrupting your Fall Forum for just a few quick but important announcements. First and foremost, it's fall, so let's talk about spring. And by spring, I mean our spring workshop that's coming up April 21st to 24th. So mark your calendars as we head to San Antonio, Texas for our annual spring workshop. That's right, grab your boots and get ready for this big, happy BCA family reunion with 4 fun-filled days of learning, networking, exploring, and, of course, celebrating our fellow members who take home gold at the Wilmer C. Fields Awards. This year's theme is All in the Name of the Lord, stemming from Colossians 3:17. Hotel reservations can now be made at the Menger Hotel by visiting baptistcommunicators.org/workshop. BCA members can benefit from a special hotel rate of $149 per night, now until April 8th. Stay tuned to our socials and website for further workshop updates. If you're looking for another professional development opportunity that's just right around the corner, may I suggest Digital Media Con. This exciting opportunity kicks off next Tuesday, October 22nd, so just like I said, right around the corner, and runs through Thursday, October 24th. This exciting virtual conference is geared towards Christian communicators, hey, that's you, and will feature special sessions about AI, e-marketing, and digital communications. And best of all, BCA members can register for a discounted price. So register today or learn more at digitalmediacon.com. Speaking of great opportunities, if you liked what you heard earlier this morning in our first session and want to find those awesome resources that we talked about, I've got good news for you. You can purchase your very own copy of The Unreadable Book, another book you probably won't read, by Dawn Barger and Grant Lovejoy at the IMB store at imb.org. And other resources that we talk about today will also be available to you, so make sure you follow our socials and check out our website to be able to access those resources at a later time. You can join our virtual camaraderie by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Yes, we are on all three of those. So find us on each one of those platforms and give us a follow by finding the handle at Baptist Communicators. And last, but certainly not least, we can't get away without talking about membership renewal. So with a special message from our membership VP, Sarah Graham, she's going to talk to us about membership renewals.
Hey, communicators, have you renewed your membership yet? Do you want me to keep sending these videos? Think it over. Renew today.
You heard the woman, and you guys know Sarah. She will hunt you down. So now is the time to renew your BCA membership. You have now until November 30th. Membership renewals are only $85 per member for up to 5 members. If you have more members than that, great. There's a discounted price for the more members you have. So renew your membership today by going to baptistcommunicators.org/membership.
Thank you to Union University for that first-hand glimpse into the vibrant community life that you have on your campus. Our next session dives into a topic that affects each of us in our day-to-day work, project management. And here with me today are 2 project management rock stars, Terry Stuckey, IMB Director of Marcom Operations, and Talita Skutta, IMB Marketing Project Manager. They're here to give us a high-level overview of essential tools and techniques that you can use in your day-to-day work. Terry and Talita, thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks, Bobby. We're really excited to be here and looking forward to our time together.
Yes, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
So I thought I would start with a simple definition of project management. Project management is the act of planning, organizing, and managing a project to achieve a predefined goal or outcome. All types of businesses and organizations rely on projects to achieve many of their short-term and long-term goals, because projects are how we get things done. So at the IMB, we're focused on one mission, one vision, one team with one message, addressing the world's greatest problem, which is lostness. So as a marketing and communications team, we've adopted an agency approach in terms of how we're organized and how we approach our work. So we have the following key roles in our project teams in order for us to push projects over the finish line. So you've got your clients and your stakeholders. Those are going to be the ones that are requesting the project and have a need or a challenge to solve. We got our account managers, project managers, and subject matter experts. These are the gears that get it done. They're the ones that get the work done. Talita's in one of those roles. And then we have the intake review team. And this is a really important structure to have in place. This is the group that looks at the incoming request and decides, is this something we should be working on? Is this a subset of something we should be working on, or can it be combined with another project? But critical that you're asking those questions before you start working on a project.
So I am a project manager at IMB, as Terry said, and I'm very, very glad that it is not my job to choose which projects we take on and not. But I do have a question about the review team. So what do you do if there is competing priorities? Two projects come in, they're both important. How does the review team handle that?
Yes, good question. It's not black and white. It does vary depending on what the project is, but ultimately everything that we do should be measured against our corporate goals and objectives. And so that's one of the first questions that we ask is, does this align with the overall umbrella of where we're trying to take the organization and what we're trying to achieve? Basically, is this going to affect lostness in any way? But also equally important is, do we have the resources for all of these projects? And so impact and resources are critical in that decision. And what's going to have the greatest impact? How are we going to get these projects done? Is one going to have a greater impact than another? Or is this something that, yes, we want to do, but maybe not now? We push pause and we say, maybe once we get through this season, we can go back to that priority. So all of that then enters the importance of good project management, because the better that we are managing our projects, the more projects that we can get done.
So project management basics, some just very basic things about project management is that project management have different methodologies. These methodologies are ways to plan and execute on projects, but more than that, it's a mindset. So some of them are Lean, Six Sigma, Waterfall, Agile. I think there's over 20 of them, so we can't go through all of them. But Lean is, for example, is one where you cut out waste to bring value to organization. Agile is focused on change and taking change and making that into opportunities. There are a couple of things that these methodologies or these mindsets have in common. So a project has to be delivered within a certain time frame and within budget. That is number one, what a project manager aims for. Then the project needs to have, as Terry said, bring value or impact to the organization as a whole. So it's not just the project, but we have to have that bigger picture in front of us when we run projects. Collaboration is key. So projects don't happen in a vacuum in an organization, but it also needs a team. I am not a graphic designer. You do not want me to design anything, but I can help the graphic designer by getting the right information to them on the right time so they can do their job. Then lastly, and this one is important for smaller organizations, is projects have a start and they have a finish. So let's take a monthly newsletter, for example. If you have a monthly newsletter and you just want to get the information out there, then it is an ongoing job. It's not a project. If you want to make it a project, you need to track KPIs. You need to have a strategy around it. Once you get the KPIs and those measurable outcomes from the emails, you can then plan, reorganize, re-strategize, and narrow down and really bring value. That's the difference between like just ongoing work and actually running a project.
And if I could interject, so a
Yes, please.
KPI, to unpack what that stands for.
A key performance indicator. So that would be, for an email, your click-through rate, your open rate, things that you can measure and make decisions based on that measurement. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Another basic in project management is the project life cycle. So the project goes through 5 life cycles: initiation, planning.
Sorry.
Little technical difficulties. There we go.
There we go. Sorry about that. So we have initiation, planning, monitoring and controlling, and closure. I think I missed one. Initiation, planning, execution. Sorry, that's it. Important one. Monitoring, controlling, and closure. The reason why understanding the project life cycle is when it comes to decision making, the same decision that we are going to make in a planning phase may have little to no impact on the project scope, time, and budget. That very same decision, if we make that same decision later, let's say in monitor and controlling, then the risk of a big scope change, times change, that changes. So that's important to know where in the life cycle you are when you're managing projects. Now, again, if you are a smaller team and you have, you're wearing all the hats, you're trying to do all the things, you don't have time to figure out which part of the life cycle you're in and how that impacts your decisions, I would recommend having 2 phases, planning and production. So in the planning phase, you get all your information you need, you write your creative briefs, you meet with your team, you try and get to a place where you know what this project is about and how you're going to deliver on the project. Then you go into production. That is when, for example, we send out, if we want to make a brochure for an upcoming event at church. So now we send out that brochure to the printer to get printed. So you are in production. The important thing here is to draw that line between planning and production, because once you're in production, you don't want to go make changes. You don't want to. It's just like
been there.
So having that hard line that you draw, I think that's going to help everybody.
We have a question coming in. How do you get everyone on the team to buy into your project management process? I know that's a big question.
That is a big question. So buy-in, first of all, is really important from your team. So I would almost not move forward into execution if I don't get buy-in in planning. That still doesn't say how to get buy-in. I think interpersonal skill takes a long way. Really valuing and understanding what people do. For example, again, graphic designers. I work a lot with graphic designers. I really respect the work that they do. So, for example, knowing and understanding where they are coming from really makes it easy for them to buy in. If there's any concerns or they're concerned about risk or scope, if you could give them that clarity, that helps with buy-in. Also, again, like Terry said, one vision, have an organizational vision, know what it is, work towards that vision. We have 5 strategic objectives. They are on our desks, they are in our hallways. As an organization, we know where we are going. So if you can rally around people, not just the project, but say this project is bringing value to the bigger organization. I think that helps a lot.
I think you touch on something really good too with interpersonal relationships, because if the designers understand that you understand what they're going through, they're more likely to buy in with your project process, because they're like, okay, they've thought through all of this with me in mind as well.
Yeah.
And so that's really good.
Yeah, and I think that is why I personally love project management. Is I'm not specifically a writer or a designer or a printer, but being part of the project makes me part of that for a little while, and I can see how they do it. And just having that, it really gets me excited to see the different people and how the team works together.
Absolutely.
So
that's what it's all about, is teamwork.
Teamwork makes the dream work. Well, there are sometimes we have more than we can handle in our team.
That doesn't happen very often.
And we need to make a decision about what we call a project triangle. So you have your scope, your cost, and then your timeline, and within that is quality. So somehow something needs to give. So Terry, can you break that down a little bit for us?
Yes, this is one of my favorite analogies, the fast, cheap, and good. So you cannot have all 3. Many people want all 3, and many of our stakeholders on a weekly basis, want all three.
Yes.
But you only get to pick two. So if you want it fast and you want it good, it's not going to be cheap. If you want it cheap and fast, it's probably not going to be very good. And if you want it good and cheap, it's likely not going to be fast. So it is super important that you get your client to understand two of the three, but we can't do all three. Planning is paramount. You need to lock in what those outcomes are and what those deliverables are that you're trying to achieve, and stick to the timeline and the milestones. Highlighting again what Talita just said, the planning and production or execution have to be separate. You can't be doing planning once you get over here. So this is a great transition into scope creep. It's a common challenge in project management. We've all heard the term, and it's often one of the reasons that change happens within a project. The number of revisions and the number of creeping beyond that scope is really what can damage a project, and it could be dead in the water before it launches with too much scope creep. So, Talita, can you explain a little bit more on why the revision process and the approval process is important?
Yes. So on scope creep, I think the easiest way to explain it is having the agile process for us, because I'm first going to explain like why scope creep is such a big problem and how revisions and approval fit into that. So if you look at the agile process, it's very similar to the 5 phases of a project plan. We also have a planning stage, design, development, then you go into review and then launch. So in Agile, we plan for change, but it's controlled change. So every time you go through what we call a sprint, you go through all these phases. Again, with design, for example, if you are designing that brochure, and you say, we are going to plan that we have 3 revisions in that brochure. So 3 times we're going to ask for approvals. Approvers will probably come back with some changes. We're going to make those changes. But we plan in our timeline, we plan enough time for, one, the approvers to actually look at it, and give feedback. We don't want them to not when they're on vacation, not in the middle of the night. We are trying to give them a couple of days, if we can, to look through it. And then we plan for the creatives to actually make those changes. Yeah. So that all impacts your timeline. But that is a controlled environment where you get something like a change that we call a change spiral. So those are just you are just going round and round and you're making changes all the time, and later you actually spin out of control and you get further away from what you initially wanted the design to look like. The other thing is situations where you have multiple approvers. So in big organizations that does happen, and it needs to happen. So you'll have someone who looks at the copy, you have a director, creative director that will look at the brand and how we're doing the brand. So you have multiple approvers. That puts an added layer to projects. So first of all, remember, asking for approval doesn't mean that it's accepted. Okay, when you ask for approval, you're asking for feedback, so be ready to make the revision and plan for it. Some other strategies or ideas around handling multiple approvers is my best one that I can think of is getting everybody in the same room. So get your approvers, if you have 3 or 4 approvers, get them in the same room, show them what you've done, where you want to, that brochure again, show them the brochure, tell them why you want it, where you want it, and let them all decide among. So if there's discrepancies in the approval process and they are not in agreement, you give them that room to work it out face to face. Again, that interpersonal relationship. The second thing is communicate deadlines clearly to them. Don't send off an email asking for approval without being, can I have that back by X date? And you can even explain, if we don't get it by X date, we cannot go to print, which means the whole project will be delayed. So that's another thing. The last thing to remember is that not all your approvers has necessarily been into the weeds of the project. So, for example, again, creative directors, he doesn't necessarily walk every step of the creation. We even sometimes bring in outside creative people to help with the workload, and he hasn't seen every iteration until then. So just bringing him up to speed before you send it to him also helps, and like, we always want to have that timeline smaller and smaller and more controlled.
We do have a question from the audience. Do either one of you have a defining moment or story of where you've had to reevaluate your style of project management? And what did that reevaluation process look like?
Wow.
Wow.
They're good question askers.
They are very good question.
What comes immediately to my mind, and I was going to piggyback on what she was just talking about with process and approvals, and then our last question about getting people on board. So over the course of the last year here at the IMB, we've transitioned into this agency approach and setup. And while we had project management before, we adopted a much more disciplined approach to it. With that, I have found, depending on what client we're working with, there may be tweaks to how you manage that project. The basic elements are there, but in our process definition here at the IMB, we have this little cloud figure up in the right-hand corner called emotional equity. And so really building those relationships with those that you work with, and when you're building those timelines, Sally Joe, you just need to buffer the approval dates. And so you add a couple of days when you're working, with that group, or this one is going to be right on time, and so I don't need to buffer it. But the more that your stakeholders are able to see that the project management process works and their projects are running more smoothly, you'll also gain that buy-in from them too. So just adjusting a little bit depending on who the client is that you're serving, and also the team that you're made up of. I've got 4 account managers and 4 project managers, and they all find different ways to work with each other, and may tweak the process a little bit. Anything you would add?
No, I think that covers it.
I think it also, to answer further on that question, when you're dealing with the style of project management you're applying to the project, that's probably covered a good bit in the questions that you ask of the project before, so that you can, with better certainty, apply the right style of project management to that specific project.
And the only thing I would add to that is that even though, I love Agile, I have used Agile for multiple years within a agency creative background. That's where I come from. And then when I moved into the IMB, there were definitely some waterfall. So waterfall is where you have one task that you need to do before you can get to the next task. It's again, printing is the best example. So you have final art, then you go to print. In the agency, it was even that process was much more changeable, fluid. So for me, I don't have a specific moment, but just remembering that you can use multiple methodologies and you don't just use just Agile or just waterfall. You can have hybrids of the different ones to get to your goal. But yes, the planning phase would be the place to plan that.
Especially if there's a campaign or something, it's going to have different facets of that campaign, and so it's going to need different style of project management.
Exactly. Different people like different people just flourish in different styles as well.
Yeah, that's great. We have another question. Do you ever keep track of when things go wrong or maybe not efficiently, to then address the next time a project comes up or a follow-up meeting post-project?
Yeah, and that's actually in one of my next points, but that's good. And it is super, super important. We call it retrospective here at the IMB, otherwise known as a project debrief. And having the discipline of really keeping track of what you've spent, what were those original goals and how did they turn out, which is going to be an indicator of how well those goals were defined. But we absolutely want to say, what can we do better next time? You know, what went well on this project, but also what didn't go so well. And for folks that have not done that kind of a exercise before, sometimes it may feel a little uncomfortable.
Staying a little too offended,
Yep.
right?
And that's where the one team, one mission comes in. We just had a debrief earlier this week where there were some hard results. They weren't quite where we wanted them to be. And Talita did such a great job of reassuring the stakeholders and those in the room, we're all in this together. This is not pointing fingers at you or this process, but we're all in this together. And so what can we learn from this? How can we avoid doing this in the future?
Having a better IMB as a whole.
Yeah.
And then again, that emotional equity and
Yes.
building those relationships, and reminding folks that, you know, we're all here to share the gospel. And that's what we do every day in our jobs. So
That's wonderful.
yeah.
That is.
All right. So just to recap, you need to set your project team up for success. Clearly define roles for your team. Everybody needs to know what their role is and what they should be doing. Establish an approval process. Talita touched on that, but really important that not try to minimize how many people have to approve so that it's not 20 people at the table trying to give their opinions. Make sure you are mindful and your team is mindful of the impact of changes, and that includes scope creep. Set clear goals for your team. Make sure that everybody is clear on what those goals are and how they're going to get there. And then clearly communicate expectations, not only with your team, but with your stakeholder and clients. And there are 3 things that a project manager never wants to hear.
So one of them is a little bit around expectations as well, but it is if someone comes to a project manager and they say, we don't really have a deadline. Like, can you just please get it done? We just need it to be done. It, like for me, like I don't even know where to start. I get anxiety.
I would too.
I don't know. Like next year maybe when we are quiet. I don't know. So think through your project, think through your own expectation of how important is this project, and ask yourself that question: how important is it for your organization? And then come and say, I would rather have someone come and tell me, we really need to do this because X, Y, and Z. We only have 2 weeks. I'm so sorry that I asked this late in the game. I would rather take on that project than one with just whenever you can. So that's number one. It's just small. I don't know if any designer has ever heard this word. It's like, let's just make a small change.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Understanding that what is small and quick in your mind is not necessarily small and quick in someone else's mind. Like if you want to have a illustration, again, the graphic designer illustration, but if you have an illustration, it's a beautiful illustration, but it is a static picture, and someone comes like, oh, wouldn't it be so cool if we just have snowflakes like running down, like make it an animation. It's a quick change. It's not a quick change. It takes time, it takes effort, and it's going to cost extra money to make. So just don't assume because you think it's a small change that it is a small change. Lastly, final is not always final. So if you have a document and you label it, it's been proofread, it's been approved, it's final, then that is final. We cannot have, again, approvers and after the fact, people coming in and saying, we need to make changes. Now, if it's big changes and it's going to actually hurt the organization, that's a different story. But we want to try and get a final product final and then label it final before it goes out to print, for example, again.
I can recall some of my own projects in my file folders where it's final 2, revised.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
I have a lot of files that are named final, and then final.
Which one's the final?
Yeah. All
So,
right.
I had a question about your, in the beginning, when you're planning and you're asking these questions of how it aligns to the IMB's goals, do you all have, is that, I don't want to use the word templatized, but that's the only one that's coming to mind, of where it's just a checklist that you go through and ask those questions, and who's in the room for that? Like to answer
For the
that?
approval process?
For the approval process.
Yeah, so currently the review team is the MARCOM, Marketing Communications Leadership Team.
Okay.
With our vice president leading it, and then his direct reports. And our goals and objectives here at the IMB, like Talita said, we actually have them front and center on our desk. So there's 5 very clearly defined objectives. And in that intake review meeting, there are often times that we will literally walk ourselves through which of these does it align to, and where does it fit? Because sometimes if you leave it up to the client or the stakeholder, everybody can make a project fit somewhere in there.
Yes.
But when you unpack it, are you able to clearly see that direct line to how it's going to move the needle? And so it's a discipline that takes practice, but it is well worth the exercise to make sure that you are working on the right things.
I'm sure it also sets us some expectations for those internal clients when you start asking those questions and having those evaluations, because then they're like, oh, they're taking my project seriously, but also I need to make sure I'm communicating edits to them because I'm taking up their time as well, so there's a buy-in there for sure.
Yep.
And if we break that down to a project management level, we normally write SMART goals for that project. So we know it's gone through the approval process, so it does touch on our 5 core objectives or strategic objectives. So then we write SMART goals, and then we will go back to the stakeholder and say, these are the goals. We want to convert 30% of booth visits into X. And then we get their buy-in, our team's buy-in, and then you have that goals and that objectives for the project as well. So that helps a lot as well.
Do you, I believe we need to wrap up here because we've got about a minute left, but I will not ask my last question so we can keep on with Fall Forum. But thank you all so much for being here and answering these questions and presenting that project management is such a huge, I would say, dare to say, almost pain point in a lot of people's organizations, because the projects can succeed or fall with project management, good or bad. And so we really appreciate you taking the time to do that with us today. And if you all weren't able to take notes, I just want to encourage you that we will have the full presentation along with a list of resources posted to our website in the coming days. So never fear if you weren't able to write anything down. But we also have one more speaker on the schedule for you today. But first, a video from Hannibal LaGrange University.
right, and that's a wrap on all of our university previews. So you'll have the Student Awards show in just a little while. Stick around for that. We have one more speaker for you today. Our final guest today may be familiar to some of you watching. Jim Veneman is a past BCA president. He's a photojournalist and an educator. And I had the pleasure of working alongside Jim at CBU. Hi to everyone at CBU. Where we even shared an office for a time with our awesome grad assistant, Rain. The party in there was packed in. So for years, I got a front row seat to an absolute masterclass in what it means to make an impact through storytelling, powered by such genuine curiosity about the world, about others, and as Elizabeth Smith pointed out, about our neighbors. Many times that was through images and stories that Jim's going to share with you today, things from time spent on assignment or otherwise, but just as often it was in the way he approached a phone call with someone he hadn't talked to for a while, or a conversation with a cashier at the campus coffee shop, or so many conversations with students who came into that little office and popped in for a photo meeting or just to chat or for some guidance. And all of it was always through stories, through storytelling. So right now, you are going to step into a version of that little office. It didn't look quite like this. Very close.
Similar.
Yeah, similar. So you're going to step into that office where Jim probably has a story about one of those students who walked in, or maybe about someone he met 5 minutes before he walked into this room, because he always takes the time to stop and notice and to hear people's stories and then share them with everyone. So thank you, Jim. Thank you for being here today, and I'll let you take it away.
And this really is very similar to yes, it's got to be just like, that's perfect. Similar to our office situation, because our desks were right beside each other, and we always knew what each other were doing. We always did. Two stories that come to mind about that close relationship there. One day I was looking out the window toward a parking lot, and there were some students getting out of a car, and they all had their sweatshirts and hoodies on, and they were kind of bundled up, and I don't know, this is like maybe October-ish, something like that, and I said, Sonia, look at those students getting out of the car, and they're all bundled up. And now I had just come in from Tennessee, and it's feeling pretty good out. And Sonia said, well, it's getting pretty cold out there. Then I realized, oh yeah, Sonia is from this LA area. This is her place. Okay, another story. A student did come in one afternoon and was very concerned, very concerned about a photograph that she had just taken, and she wanted us both to take a look and try to help her out, and so we said, well, what have you got? And she said, well, it's a picture of the moon. And I said, oh, okay. And so she showed us on her camera a picture of the moon, like you would all expect it sort of to look. If you're standing on the ground, you take your camera and just raise it, and you take a picture of the moon. And it's a fairly distant little white dot. Okay. And I said, okay, well, what's the other one? And she moved to the next frame, and it looked like the first frame, almost basically identical. And I said, so what's your question? And she said, well, I was on the ground for the first one, and I went to the top of the rec center for the other one. I was much closer. So, yeah, that's real. That's real. And so we had a lot of little occurrences like that would happen that would make life fun. And you just tell them this is good effort. I'm just keep at it. I'm sure it'll change. And but speaking of change, I changed a good bit of what I had planned on doing today. In fact, just some of what you're going to see on the screen, I changed just minutes ago because I was listening to what was being said this morning, and there's some pretty big deal stuff. If you're hearing me, if some of you came in late and you're hearing me say this, that there's some pretty big deal stuff. There really was. In fact, our son, just a moment ago, who is in Memphis, Tennessee, St. Jude, working along, is watching what's going on. And he sent a text to Carol, my wife, just a moment ago, saying, we deal with this here at St. Jude all the time. And it's good to hear, someone else talking about it from their perspective. So, anyway, I hope you'll, run back and see some of the recordings if you missed it, because it is pretty big deal stuff. Okay. This is going to be kind of a different way of presenting, I realize, and I'm sure some of you are going to say, Jim, you could have done this another way. Probably could have, but not for today. Okay, you're in the office with Jim and maybe Sonia right here, and we're just chatting, and I'm showing you some stuff, and that's what we're doing. This photograph is one that I did not know existed until a short time ago. And a member of our family sent this to me and said, I didn't know if you had this photograph of your mom and your sister or not. I did not have this. I'd never seen it before. This is my mom, and the sister, Babs, that I grew to know in years to come. But at this point, I was not around yet. And my mom had just gone through a divorce, and it was a short time, we think, a fairly short time after that divorce that photograph was taken. And she's just looking out a doorway, just looking out the door. And I think she's wondering, what's next? What's going on? What's happening in my life? What's going on? And I think my sister, Barbara, who we all call Babs was looking up at my mom, and she had 100% confidence in what was going on. Now, my mom is looking out this door, kind of wondering what's going on out there, but Babs was not wondering. She had 100% confidence in what was about to happen because she was looking up at her mom, and Mom had it. Okay. Years later, the previous photo, 1936. This is 1970. The fall of 1970. And I made this photograph in my high school. This is a person that worked around the building. We all knew Joe, and Joe spent a lot of time talking with us, just sitting on the steps of a staircase, just chatting about stuff, whatever it is we want to talk about. And he was a fantastic listener. And so we decided to dedicate our yearbook to Joe that year, and my advisor asked me if, over the course of the fall semester, if I could find an image of Joe that might help in our dedication page. And so this is the photograph that I did. And it's interesting when I look at this, see how similar it is, him looking out this window and connecting it kind of with my mom's image. It's interesting that we don't often dream about making great art. We dream of having already made it. We dream about the finished product. We dream about how it's going to look on the wall, how we're going to get all these accolades and standing ovations and awards and all that. But actually, before we can look at it, before we can see it, we've got to get there. And that's a lot of what this morning has been about, is how do we get to that finished piece? This young woman, Annalise, was in a summer camp that Carol and I were teaching last summer. Annalise showed up early one day. She was the first one there, and I asked her, what do you like to do when you're just having fun? And she said, I like basketball more than anything. And I said, well, do you have a favorite shot or a favorite thing you like to do, or what do you enjoy the most? And she said, I really like making a shot that I've never been able to make before. She said, it's my favorite thing. That is a pretty cool thing, but you don't enable yourself to make that shot without a lot of work. A lot of stuff goes in between that first step into the gymnasium and making that. But I think it is an outstanding thing to set goals that are beyond your reach. But, how do we get there? How do we actually accomplish some of those things? Just a moment ago, I heard some big deal stuff about deadlines and about approvals and changes and that kind of thing. Oh my goodness. Once upon a time, this was one of my workplaces, a darkroom. I spent a lot of time in there. But to make changes, to make shifts, to do things, it took me some time. Well, you know what? About 20 years or so after this picture was made, my editor, Linda Lawson, came into my office one day and said, "Jim, I'm hearing a lot about this digital stuff. Do you think we need to consider doing that?" And I was completely comfortable with this. And I said, "Well, sure, I've been reading about it too. We can kind of move a little bit in that direction and see what it's like." But I was comfortable here. Okay, you could say that I was creatively comfortable. And I think sometimes that's the way we get. We kind of find ourselves in that kind of position. We just like the darkroom, or whatever that equivalent might be. We just kind of like that. There's a movie. If you've not seen this movie, this is a Friday. You ought to check this thing out tonight. Just get your friends, your family, your whoever together, and check this thing out. But it ends up being about the potential for change. And at one point, Helen Mirren, who owns this one restaurant, is working with this young man, her mentor at this moment. And there's a recipe that she considers to be the ultimate recipe. And she tastes this recipe that the young mentor had made, and she said, "It tastes different. There's something different about it." And he said, "Well, I changed some of the spices." And she said, "Well, why would you ever change something that has been cherished for 200 years? And he said, "Madam, maybe 200 years is long enough." I was looking through some magazines. This is one that I've looked through before, and it's a funny thing that at this particular moment, this is one that I want to talk about because Matt Jones is the one that photographed the story. I'm going to read you the first paragraph. In May 2000, during an appointment service for new missionaries in Norfolk, Virginia, International Mission Board staff writer Jenny Rogers responded to a call to missionary service. Those who know Rogers were not surprised. Her passion for missions is transparent. Those familiar with her work know that it animates her writing. And then as I flip through this magazine of photographs, it's just incredible what Matt Jones did in capturing one person's life and showing it to others to inspire them to maybe go a step further with what they're doing and being willing to take a step further. An incredible thing. Okay, and then on this page, when you open this up, this very magazine up, this is what you find. And there's some familiar names in here, but one that I want to mention specifically this time is Dan Beatty. I asked Dan Beatty to speak at a conference one time, and when I asked him to speak, I said, "Dan, you're going to have like 40 minutes or so, plus maybe 5 or 10 minutes of questions." And so I remember getting up, and I introduced Dan to everyone, and Dan walked up on the platform, and I noticed that he had 2 pages in his hand. And I thought, well, that's cool. He's very, very ready, very ready. And he was totally, completely ready. And he walked up to the platform, and he put these down, and he read those 2 pages. Done. And Dan said, "Thank you." And he walked off the platform and sat down. And I thought, wow, that is clever. That is really interesting. Now he's got our attention. I didn't expect, though, Dan didn't get back up. he was done. He was really done. We had a lot of minutes left. It was crazy. But I want to tell you about two things, just two. I've used these pages many times in classes, but just two things. All of our most successful efforts have relationship at the center. All of our most successful efforts have relationship at the center. We were actually all morning, we've been hearing more or less about that. The second thing is the way you see is your voice. Your vision is your legacy. It is your gift to the rest of us. And that means your vision, your voice, your ideas, not just somebody else's that you've repackaged and, no, your voice, your ideas, the way you think. You have value, you're here because, God called you to be here, wherever here is. And there's something for you to say. That's your gift. That's your gift to all of us. Okay, one of the most amazing moments that I've ever witnessed is when Sonia and I were in a newsroom at CBU, and Lauren Shelburne was managing editor of this magazine, Pursuit Magazine, university publication. And there was a plan in place for X number of photographs to be taken for this very unusual story about finding identity in diversity. And it was a really cool thing about how not everyone is alike, and for a whole host of reasons, we're not the same. And it was a great thing. And so this is the night right before this publication is going to the printer, and it was not really finished visually. There was a big gap, and it became apparent real quickly that we did not have a cover. We didn't have a cover. We're missing some other things, but the main thing was we didn't have a cover. And Lauren just kind of sat there very calmly and then said, could you guys give me just a little bit? And she had some portraits that had been taken of some people that were being used in the story. And there's a color printer right over there. She printed out an image of each person, and then she began tearing them up. She just tore them up. And she reassembled them into this. And then she made a copy of that image, and there you have it, this cover. Finding identity in diversity. I mean, just how incredibly clever and amazing. So, 2 weeks ago, I hadn't talked to Lauren in a long time. I called Lauren and asked her, what about AI? If we had this challenge tonight, now, instead of the fall of 2018 when this was done, now you have various AI-related apps that you can use. Do you think that would have changed this cover? And she said, I don't think so. I think, we still would have had this. And then she began to talk about how important AI is in her work, but that ultimately the ideas come from the artist, the designer, the writer, the photographer, that AI is an encourager, and it provides ideas, and it kind of wakes you up like, wow, I hadn't thought about that. And it can be a tremendous thing, but that ultimately this cover would have come from Lauren Shelburne. But I think the AI thing is amazing, and it is right now it's kind of like me in a darkroom thinking about digital. It's another thing that we need to take advantage of. This relationship thing that I read that Dan Beatty's talking about, a lot of you work in really small offices. Most of us do. The closer you get to various AI relationships, you realize it's almost like adding a team member. It's, when I was working in Nashville so long, I would go on break and I'd go down to this room down the hall, and I could sit there with friends of mine, and we could talk about families and what's going on, but we would inevitably circle back around and talk about a next assignment, and we could brainstorm just spontaneously about, what we're doing. And it was an amazing thing. Well, some of you don't work in situations where you can do that. Now, you can deliberately Zoom with someone or something like that, but this AI relationship that actually does develop over time can really be a pretty cool thing. Just a few days ago, Carol and I were given an opportunity to go to Florida and spend some time with some people that were really in the middle of a tough thing with the hurricane situation. And William Hahn was here for a little bit, and he had actually gone down and covered the first hurricane, the one that hit like 2 weeks before this last one. And so I never met William, but I had seen a video that he did that was pretty amazing, in which he's just teaching about how to use like an iPhone and for photography, and it was brilliant. And so I called William and just talked to him on the way down there, and he gave me some insights that were so helpful. An incredibly helpful individual. Well, they're all around us, especially in BCA. My goodness, they're everywhere. This was just one image out of what we saw happening down there. But this guy in this yellow shirt, Joseph White, is someone who's actually sort of the boots on the ground, so to speak, for disaster relief. He is from Ohio, working in partnership with Florida Baptist Convention, comes down and brings his team and does incredible things. But at this moment, he's talking to Teresa, who has just lost, well, she still has the framework of the house, but everything inside is out on her lawn, including her mother's wedding band. She has no idea where it is. And that's the kind of thing that people are going through down there. It's really, really amazing. Okay. My goodness, there's so many things I could talk about. But during my tour around Sin Relief, at one point I was in a car with Kent Mallett, and I talked to him a lot about the AI possibilities. And he said one thing that sticks out, and to me this kind of brings up a whole lot of things, but he mentioned prompt refinement and how incredibly important prompt refinement is. And when I started thinking about all this stuff that we're talking about, so much of it did connect with prompt refinement, how we refine our methods, our processes. Like disaster relief has changed a lot over the years. Sometime, just for the fun of it, I want you to make a paper airplane any way you want to make it. Any way you want to make it. And I want you to, I think I'm being told I need to really stop. Really, really stop. Okay, I know that I've got to stop. I'm gonna go forward. I've got to go forward to one thing. Okay, this one thing. Okay, road to Emmaus. A couple of people were going down this road, and an extra person came in and said, hey, what's going on? And they said, you don't know? And this other person was Jesus himself. And he began to ask questions, and he began to talk to him about, what went on. And I think sometimes, later, y'all can come on up. Come on up. Come on up. Hey, Bobby. Hey, Sonia. Hey, come on in. This means that I'm really done. They were actually standing there ready to come on like 30 seconds ago. But I think sometimes in our efforts to handle things and take care of things, we forget, we're as blind as those people were on the road to Emmaus. And we forget that Jesus, that Christ, that God is right there. We just need to have a conversation. We just need to build that relationship. As important as these two people are in my life, it's a pretty incredible thing to know that God himself wants to be a part and has probably brought about that moment that you're in the first place. Okay, now.
Thank you so much, Jim. I think you hit the nail on the head, though. It's inviting God into our work, into our everyday life, and into those times when you're driving to cover a hurricane in Florida. that he works in the smallest ways and in most unexpected ways. So thank you for that. And thank you, BCA, for taking time out of your day. We are so appreciative of you and how you communicate what God is doing throughout the world. And thank you to Sonia for having tireless work in organizing this event.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, President Bobby, for being here. I think we had fun. I hope it was as enriching and enjoyable for you at home as it was for us here. Thank you to all our speakers near and far, to Margaret as well, the whole BCA team. Thank you to the International Mission Board for hosting us here today. Special shout out to Kathleen for being the person sort of in both those worlds for the IMB and BCA, and to you for taking the time out and sticking with us here to the end. Before we head over to the student awards here in a moment, we have one last crucial announcement. It's a big deal, you guys. We have so many birthdays to celebrate. Talking about, the center of successful things being relationship, we want to shout out Matt Jones, Jonathan Howe, Cam Tracy, and our very own Jim Veneman, who took time on his birthday to be here and speak with us today.
My goodness.
Happy birthday, Jim.
Shout out to Kathleen's hand.
Yes, meet Kathleen. We have a cinnamon roll larger than my head for you today.
This is the ultimate food.
Covers all the food groups.
It does. A cinnamon roll. Like, are you kidding me? This is it right here. Man, can I blow these candles out?
Probably should. We didn't check in on the fire.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you all for joining me for my birthday party.
And thank you, Kathleen, for making the cinnamon roll mission possible.
Yeah, this is great.
Thank you again, everyone. We are going to spend some quality time with each other in this cinnamon roll here, and we will send you guys over to the student awards right now. Thank you again for being here, and that's a wrap on Fall Forum 2024. Thank you, everyone.
Yay.
And happy birthday.
Communicators. Wow, what an incredible day we've had here at the IMB for today's Fall Forum. Welcome to the Grand Prize Award Ceremony for BCA Student Awards Competition. I'm Kathleen Sparks, IMB Senior Photo Archivist and Photographer, and this year's BCA Awards Chair for 2024-2025. I'm excited to celebrate each one of our 5 schools who participated in this year's BCA Student Awards competition. If you were tuned into the Fall Forum, you might have caught a quick video shout out representing each school. There were 121 remarkable entries entered into this year's competition. We had 14 BCA card-carrying members acting as judges from all walks of Southern Baptist communications life. And we had one winner to even earn a perfect score, which I believe might be a first for BCA. Our Grand Prize Award winners were chosen by the judges from among the first place prize winners in each division. For the full list of division award winners, please check out our BCA website at baptistcommunicators.org/awards. Today, we're here to shine a spotlight on our Grand Prize winners, each of whom has shown amazing talent within their realm of communications. Now, let's kick things off. On to the awards. For our first Grand Prize Award for Exceptional Achievement in Public Relations, the winner is Samford University's Olivia Cope for her entry Samford Crimson Public Relations Campaign. The PR campaign showcased impressive research and well-organized presentation, highlighting a thorough understanding of the publication's needs. The solid writing and detailed analysis provided actionable insights and measurable objectives, effectively capturing the status and setting ambitious goals for raising awareness. Overall, the campaign was thoughtfully designed with clear sections, informative data, and a strong emphasis on actionable tactics, demonstrating the significant effort invested in its development. Great job, Olivia, and well done, Sanford. For our next grand prize, I present the award for Exceptional Achievement in Interactive Communications. And the winner is Banner staff at California Baptist University for the banner. The website features a clean and inviting homepage that effectively showcases a variety of well-written stories relevant to campus life. Its organization and clear headings make navigation easy, while clever titles and strong photography enhance the overall design. The effort put into creating a user-friendly experience is evident, and the site encourages exploration and engagement. Great job, Banner staff, and congratulations to CBU. For our next grand prize, the award for Exceptional Achievement in News Writing. And the winner is Emma Weidman, Baylor Student Media, Baylor University, for her article, AI is Shaping What and How We Listen. The article effectively explores the ethical implications of AI in music production, using multiple sources to present thought-provoking questions and issues. Its excellent writing style, engaging opening, and well-organized content keep readers interested. By incorporating expert opinions and relevant examples, the piece not only informs but also encourages lively discussion on a topic that is increasingly relevant to students. The clever play on words adds a creative touch, making the article both informative and enjoyable to read. Great job, Emma, and way to go, Baylor. Moving on to our fourth grand prize award. This one is for Exceptional Achievement in Feature Writing. The award goes to Avery Chanel at Union University for her article, Bikes by the Mom Shelter. The piece is beautifully written, bringing a personal and emotional perspective to a distant war. Vivid imagery such as children's bikes by a bomb shelter and toddlers raising their arms in fear effectively draws readers into the setting. The storytelling is exceptional and moving, capturing the writer's pain and uncertainty about the safety of the people encountered. By incorporating direct quotes and emphasizing shared hopes for peace, the article personalizes the conflict while making it clear that the narrative is about the people involved rather than the writer's experience alone. Overall, it's a powerful and timely piece that resonates deeply, showcasing the writer's gifted storytelling abilities. Great job, Avery, and congratulations to Union as well. My own alma mater, making me proud. For our next grand prize, we have the award for Exceptional Achievement in Photography. And the award goes to Carissa Graves at California Baptist University with her photo illustration entitled Helping Hands, Breaking Ministry Barriers Through Sign Language. This project features an innovative and beautifully executed concept, highlighted by stunning images that uniquely capture the focus on hands for a deaf speaker. The thoughtful composition, particularly in the final Jesus frame, is visually striking. The choice of black and white enhances the storytelling, and the use of shutter speed effectively illustrates movement. These images are not just supportive illustrations, they stand alone as remarkable works of art. Overall, this entry has left a lasting impression for each of our judges, for its originality and artistic quality. A job well done, Carissa, and congrats again to CBU. For our next grand prize award, we have the award for Exceptional Achievement in Audio-Visual Communications. And the winner is Abby Ferguson, Baylor Student Media at Baylor University, for her video entitled Brazos Tea Party. This video effectively captures the essence of the event by clearly addressing the who, what, when, where, and why. It presents diverse perspectives from journalists, participants, leaders, and spectators, enriching the narrative. High-quality footage and well-planned filming enhance the viewing experience, making it engaging even for those without a personal connection to the school. The video is crisp, featuring a variety of shots at different focal lengths, and the natural sound is balanced, allowing viewers to fully immerse themselves in the festivities. Great job, Abby, and again, congratulations to Baylor University. For our last grand prize award, we have the award for Exceptional Achievement in Design. And this is the award that happened to also earn a perfect score by our judges. And the winner is Roundup staff, Baylor Student Media at Baylor University for their yearbook, Baylor Roundup 2023, We Are Baylor. This yearbook is beautifully designed, showcasing a strong balance of photography and typography with clean, consistent fonts. The impactful opening photo sets the tone, and the bold spreads featuring excellent photography enhance the overall presentation. Each design element appears thoughtfully executed, particularly in the News of the Year section, which will resonate with readers as a cherished memory of their college days. Overall, this superb book reflects significant effort and skill, making it a standout piece. Great job, Roundup staff! Sick 'em, Bears! Well, this concludes this year's BCA Student Awards show. Thank you all for tuning in, and congratulations again to everyone who entered the competition, and especially to our grand prize winners. What an incredible group of upcoming Southern Baptist communicators. Special thank yous go out to Margaret Colson, Pam Tracy, Mark Ritter, Matt Jones, Tristan Brink, Caitlin Jameson, all 14 of our judges, all 5 of our participating schools, and to the IMB for allowing us to host this year's BCA Fall Forum and Student Awards Show. And as a last word of encouragement, if you are a professional Southern Baptist communicator and a BCA member, be on the lookout for the upcoming call to entries for our professional awards shortly after Thanksgiving. I look forward to seeing many of you in person in San Antonio for the BCA Spring Workshop, April 21st through the 24th, 2025. Until then, blessings to you each.